God bless everybody. Today it's August 24th of 2023. I believe we are ready to see a bloodbath in the markets and carnage that's going to start to really amplify as we move towards October. We've got Jay Powell coming out tomorrow. He's going to basically work on a hawkish line that they're going to keep raising as long as the data shows them. They've had a few reports where the markets keep reflecting that somehow he's going to pause or do something, but it's not showing enough strength that he's going to have the ability not to raise rates again in his mind, and he wants to get to that 6% rate. So tomorrow he's going to come out just like he did last week. I tried to explain that on Wednesday of last week in my last video on economics that or on markets and the economy, that he was going to act extremely hawkish. That would send the markets down. This would send gold down. It would also send the dollar up, and that's another thing. We have to watch the dollar because the dollar keeps moving up. Metals, Bitcoin will move down in conjunction usually. That's how that works. And so we need to see how this all is going to happen. But tomorrow he's going to come out. He's going to be extremely hawkish. He's going to say how the data is not reflected. We've only had a couple reports and this isn't conclusive. So we're going to watch how the numbers are going to add up into September. We got that September meeting, and then we're going to decide whether we're going to raise, and more than likely they're going to raise. And if you looked at the last meeting notes and things like that, all the Fed guys at Fed people decided that they should raise. There was no breakdown in their consensus of whether they should or shouldn't raise. And so we're going to see, as you see in this article, that the Fed raises rates to the highest level in 22 years. This is causing massive problems for the banking system because we have this massive inversion that's happening in the bonds from the 2 to the 10. And I've talked about this many times. The banks borrow at the 2 and they loan at a longer duration rate of, let's say, a 7 or 10. And so when they're borrowing at a higher rate than they're loaning, they're underwater. They're not going to loan at that rate. And as you're going to see, these rates keep melting up. All of them, the 2 through the 30, are all moving up at the same time. Now the inversion isn't quite as steep, but it doesn't matter because the bonds are all melting up at the same time, which is causing you to pay more for everything that you're doing. Credit cards, auto, home, you name it, anything. And as your credit scores start to slide because you're not keeping up with everything, it costs you more because the banks will charge you more. They will force you to be in a lower credit score, and that will then cause you problems, and that will then cost you more to stay alive. And so you need to pay your debt off. If you haven't, you need to do that. So let's go through some of the numbers. I just want to show you what's coming up. I believe we will see a massive drop in the markets tomorrow because Jay Powell will be hawkish, or he will say that he's going to probably raise. There's not enough data, and they're probably not going to get enough data going into a slow season, and you're starting to watch massive unemployment occur all over the place. So he's getting his unemployment, but he's not really getting his mandates yet. It's not enough. Now they did revise, it was like March, revise it down 300,000. And so if you take that over about a year, you're talking about 25,000 jobs a year, a month. And so the unemployment, I've talked about these waves of unemployment are going to start hitting us, but he doesn't care. He wants this pain. He wants millions of jobs. This man right here wants millions of you to lose your jobs. Okay, that's how they're going to supposedly control the inflation. Okay, so when Jay says, I'm going to put pain on you, he's going to put a lot of pain on you real soon. This one's going to get really ugly. And people have no idea just how stupid this is going to get. I've talked to many banks about a year ago, and they didn't have any clue this was coming. It's just ugly that it's here, and they still don't probably have a clue. But you're watching massive layoffs in the banks and consolidation of the banks. You've had 3 companies downgrade banks. You've had Moody's, Fitch, and S&P all come out against global banks across the board and downgrade them, and you're starting to watch them cannibalize these banks. Now you're going to hear a lot about this because they're not going to tell you they're engineering this so that they can buy up all these regional banks, and then the bigger six banks that are going to control everything are going to own these under their shelter or their little roof, and then they may leave them as the same name, but they're going to be not the same bank. They're going to be a monopoly under about 5 or 6 different larger banks. And so you need to keep an eye on these things. But yes, he's going to raise. He's got a September meeting coming up. He wants to push this to 6%, as he's been talking. He's not giving up this narrative and why the markets go up and then they tank like they're going to do on Wednesday of last week, and they're going to probably do tomorrow. It's going to be real interesting to, for him to show this narrative and for people to keep buying into this narrative that we're going to hit a soft landing. September is coming. Slowdown of third quarter into fourth quarter is going to happen, and you're going to see massive layoffs. And then we have a new COVID coming out, Eris, and probably another few that are going to come out, and it's going to lock everybody down. That's going to cause all kinds of problems and move into fall. And so you're going to watch these waves again. I talked about these waves in some of the other videos and how it's like a 6-week type thing. Anyway, we're not going to get into that here. Let's look at the numbers here. There's a lot happening, and it's important that you see what's possibly going to happen tomorrow. Now, I may be wrong. I'm not saying I'm not an economist. Okay, I follow this stuff. I've been following this for 50 years. I watched more than my share of market recessions and crashes. I was actually in the Y2K 2000 we were programming because they were going to do date changes, and it was a problem for everybody. So I've been doing this a long time. People don't, I'm just not on the mainstream. Anyway, we're going to look at these numbers, and I'm going to show you probably what's going to happen. So when we go to this first chart, which is Bitcoin, and you can see Bitcoin's been floundering around. It was around 31,000, and then you had that. Now this is a weekly chart. Okay, just realize it's a weekly. They're all weekly charts in general because I want to show you what happened in the last week, and we could see another one of these this next Monday through next week, because it's going to take a while for the markets to catch up. Jay's going to come out Friday, and then there's going to be a lag by the time he talks and the markets really start to catch up with this information on Monday, and then this sort of plays out through the week as we're starting to see a lot of really light numbers in manufacturing, contraction in Germany, all kinds of stuff's happening. China's going into what they say deflation, and you're seeing a lot of big problems coming out here. But look what happened in last week when Jay came out, and that was on the 16th. Okay, look what happened. This thing dropped, and we're going to see this possibly happen again. So you're going to see a similar chart event happen attached to the back side of this. Okay, because we're running into the same thing we did in Wednesday, where he came out and said, hey, I'm going to go real hawkish, and we're probably going to still have a couple rate hikes here, and we're not going to reduce until 24 at least, maybe even 25 by the time this comes down. And you got to realize he's trying to hit a 2% inflation rate, okay, which is going to be a lot of pain from where you are now. Okay, to get him to 2%, he's going to have to put literally tens of millions of people out of work here to get the inflation and the economy to shut down, which is not what you really want to do in an economy credit-based system where you force people to spend money. And if you don't force them to spend money, the economies collapse. Okay, and that's what we're watching, a global collapse and a global reset. They want to reset this to a crypto system. Also this week you had BRICS. You got the BRICS meeting. They've added a number of different countries to that, and so we're going to watch the gold standard kick in. And when that gold standard kicks in, wherever you see that happen, that will be the real indication that they have started to change the markets, because now they're backing stuff with substantial gold, okay, or metals. which is something we don't have out here right now. But once that changes and they start to back with gold and silver, then you are at the end of the cycle and you're moving into a digital currency era, because they have to back it with gold. And they will do it through crypto because they can print this out of thin air. And so gold will be their only tangible asset on the ground, because fiat currencies may end up being regional and not necessarily a global type situation, as we have a divided world between the East and the West. So the 2-year treasury is at 5.012, which is historic. And you've seen this move up, melt up again. And this is what Jay's afraid of. Okay, so if we have him come out hawkishly, he knows this is going to melt up again. So you're going to watch rates start to skyrocket up, and you're going to watch homes from 8% into maybe double-digit numbers here. And yes, people won't buy them, but that's what the rates are, and the banks have to charge them unless it crashes. Now, if it crashes and they have to move rates to zero, that is a totally different thing going on there. But right now, the rates are melting up, and until they stop, and this is historic melts. These aren't normal melts. Okay, these are historic. Okay, let's look at the monthly on this for a second. Okay, now look what happened. Around the 16th, we started to see these spikes. Okay. Now, the markets have been thinking, based on the numbers, which have been really weak and terrible, that somehow this is going to come back and we're going to come out of this. But the service sectors are actually crashing now, which is what they thought was going to keep them up, and that's not happening. And so that's causing them all kinds of problems. So what happened? We started to see these melt ups. This was right before the meeting on the 16th. He had the meeting. Okay. And then what we've seen them melt up since, and now we're over 5. Now the banks are borrowing at this rate, okay, and they're loaning at longer duration, which we're going to look at now, okay, and so they're borrowing at a higher cost than they're loaning, and they can't do that. That's why no one's loaning anything right now, and you're watching loan agents being laid off, and you're watching banks shut down a lot of regional banking outlets. So you're going to watch them start to close these things. And what are they going to do with them? Because no one wants a bank. I mean, what are you going to do with a bank? How are you going to make that into a different business? Okay. So if the banks don't want them, it's hard to modify these. You know, there are options, but it takes a lot of work to get them to modify down to a point where they can actually use them. So let's go to these other rates and show you what I'm talking about. So you got a 5.012, which is melting up. As you can see, that today it's been melting up. It's been melting up for a while. That's what the banks borrow at. Let's go look at the other rate. So you got the 10, and we're not going to do 7. I'll show you a chart with that here in a minute on the rate of what that is right now. But the 10-year is at 4.229. This is where your credit cards, your auto, a lot of your homes and everything are built off of, because they have a lot of people locked into 7 arms and things like that. And so you're at about a 0.77 durational deficit from them borrowing to loaning, and that's not going to get it done for the banks. It's really hard for them to loan when they're losing almost 1% right off the bat before they give it to you. Now, if you move into this daily, or this, let's say this 5-day, or even the monthly, so let's look at the monthly chart real quick. You're starting to see, that's what I'm talking about. Look at that. When the 16th happened and the market started to reflect that Jay was going to come out, because it was starting to get publicized at that point that they weren't getting their way back here. Okay, so when he came out and said, yeah, I am, look what happened. The markets melted up. Of course they did. And all these are going to keep melting up as if he keeps raising, because the dollar strength is going to move up against foreign currencies. That's going to cause a problem. You're going to watch like the euro parity out against the dollar. That's unprecedented. It has happened in the past, but it's something that they don't want to see. You're watching contraction in all the manufacturing and different things like that, which is causing a massive slowdown as China just showed a report of 14% less exports in the last month or so. So as you watch these melt up, and that's what they've been doing for a while, each and every one of these have been melting up the whole time. There you go. You can go back and look at these charts and you can see how these are really affecting this. Now, it did come down because the markets, it's really amazing. You get, let's go to the month real quick, because that's just, you look at that chart, you think, wow, this is the 16th right back in here, okay? So we watched this totally melt up, and then it came down because the markets think, it's going to get better, and then it's going to remelt back up. So it's like you're on a roller coaster right now. But it's not moving down enough to matter. Do you see? Because you're still at over a 4.175, okay? And you keep moving up into a potential 4.4 ratio on the bond rate here. Okay, so it's moving up constantly. When you get into the 30, okay, this is, if you got a 30-year fixed loan, you're at 4.295. Well, the banks are borrowing at 5% or higher now, and they can't do that. So they weren't going to loan at 30 years at 1% deficit. Okay. So all these loans are being affected. As this melts up, all your loans move up with that. Okay. If you look at the Dow, we've lost in the last month about 1,221 points because the markets, they keep saying it's moving up. Tech is holding this up. AI is actually keeping the tech market up, and that is what's allowing the markets to maintain strength right now. Now, if AI goes away, or there's another issue out here in geopolitical or possibly even tomorrow leading into the September, and I've talked about this October nightmare coming up, this is going to change everything, because this is just going to break down, and we're going to see potentially this third leg drop. Okay, and I've been talking about this third leg drop. Now, look, in the last 5 days, we've watched, especially in the last day, look at this massive drop here in Bitcoin. And Bitcoin's getting ready for a potential another drop, okay, because the Dow's getting ready for another drop, because, I'm sorry, it's not Bitcoin chart. The Dow here is getting ready for another. Bitcoin's doing the same thing. It's actually following this nicely right now to a certain degree, because we just saw a massive drop in Bitcoin in the last 5 days. If we go look at that chart, this is the week, okay. Look where you went. You're from here all the way down to there. Well, that's not a whole lot different than what you're seeing in the Dow Jones. Wow, it looks almost exactly the same. Isn't that amazing? You have this massive drop, then you have it plateaus down here because it's hitting support, and then it's bouncing down support. Well, it's getting ready to drop through support. Okay, the Dow is doing the same thing right now, and that's the problem. You're starting to watch some of these charts literally move below the 50-day or 200-day moving averages, and when they do that, they're going to bounce them on that resistance, and it's going to force them down because they can't break through. Okay, I've talked about this many times. When you get to the rates, look at that. The 30-year fix is still at an 8%. It's amazing when you get to these other comparative loans. Let's say at a 7 or 16 or any of these other loans, and you apply them out here, what these rates actually get cheaper the shorter duration. And see, that's what I mean. The banks are getting killed on this stuff. So from a 15-year loan at 7.1 to a 30-year loan 7.99, okay, or 8%. Nobody's going to sell their house in this environment because you can't go out and buy another one, because you probably aren't paying 8% when you got your original loan. So nobody, and that's why you're watching a very tight market in the housing. Okay, but you're having these massive inversions on these loans, which are forcing up. Now, if we have another downturn, and you have another bond spike up, which could happen tomorrow as we move into next week, this could change. This could be maybe 9 or maybe even 10. Now you're moving back into the 1970s. I don't know if all of you realize what happened in the 1970s. We saw home 30-year fixed loans at 18%. Okay, that's pretty extreme. You're paying 30 years of the bank. You're giving them literally 20% of the valuation of the house every year. So think what the cost of that house would be by the time you paid it off. And you're not getting ahead on it because you're giving them all this interest and you're not making any principal payments. So just realize that the banks are killing these people out here when they do this. And Jay knows this. This is part of the plan of destruction. If they get everybody to lose their houses, have to turn their keys in, they can't afford to buy one, then they'll buy up all the properties, own them, and then they'll just rent them out to you, okay? And you'll all be happy to have a place just to sleep. So realize that one could be coming around the corner as Warren Buffett's sitting on $149 billion waiting to basically throw down on massive properties, farmland, anything he can get his hands on he thinks is going to make him money because that's what these pariahs do. So another thing you could possibly see happen, and I don't know a lot of people can afford metals. I get it, and about 1% of the population actually have metals. And so I just want to explain that it's probably the only hedge you really have out here. And in the end, God tells us that that won't even matter. And so it can only last us so long, and it's only going to get us so far down the road, and we have to use faith to actually get down this road anyway. Now this is a trading view chart, but realize when we had, Jay came out, we saw these metals move down, okay? So we could see that happen again. That's sort of what I'm trying to get at here on the metals. So when the dollar moves up against the other currencies, metals tend to move down, and so we're going to watch potentially another drop in metals. Now it went down into the lower 22s, and so that would have been a fairly good buy because when this does actually change and they do bring this to a metal standard with the cryptos, because they have to back it with something to make it legitimate, because there's cryptos are not legitimate. They're just something built out of thin air, and like ETFs and things like that are probably not the place to be in, because when this crashes you have no tangible asset. It just evaporates in thin air. And so you need to watch what you're buying out here. Also, if you do buy metals, I'm not a financial advisor, take security of them and store them on your own terms, not in a facility, someplace safe that you can access if you need to. Potentially you're going to watch metals, both silver and gold, move down, at least in the short term. And this could be reflective as we move through the next month, because we got that meeting in September. And so this is extremely important as you watch these charts, especially silver. Gold's not necessarily my recommendation. I would probably go into as what I would do. Not saying that you would do the same. I would go into silver because I believe silver is much more undervalued than gold, and it's used in every industry basically on the planet, and so there will always be demand for these metals. And you can break silver up much easier than you can gold, but gold is easier to carry. Big difference in weight when you go from the gold to silver duration. When you go to the dollar, and this is extremely important, I think that we should watch this because the dollar is melting up again. And look, you're moving over that this moving average, okay? This moving average matters, okay? And right now you just went back above it. That's signaling to me that it's got to what? Maybe keep moving up. If it hits down below here, then it's got to come back up against resistance. But right now it's hitting support, okay, because now it's above. And this has been moving up. I talked about the yen, how it's affecting the yen, how it's affecting all these currencies. Are devaluating, and so they're stepping in. Japanese just stepped in again and bought up a bunch of bonds and treasuries, things like that, to keep propping up their system, because they're basically, the yen is failing at this time. And so when you look at these charts, let's say if we go to a 10-day chart here, and you look at this, see what's happening. You're watching this melt up on the dollar, okay, which is affecting the foreign currencies, which is making them less valuable, and so this is causing them all kinds of problems. That's why they're at BRICS this week, talking about how they're going to move away from the petrodollar, and they just added potentially 6 or so new countries to the BRICS nations, and they've actually have now a 2-tiered system that they're working on, okay? The dollar is collapsing these currencies, and the bond rates as they move up are destroying the global banking systems, which are attached to all your pensions, 401s, houses, cars, and everything else on the planet. So your Chases, your JP Morgans, you've got a number of banks like US Bank and a number of these Wells Fargo, terrible banks that are going to really cause people a lot of pain here, as they're starting to actually close regional outlets on some of these banks. And not only doing that, but they're closing people's accounts because they can't afford to pay you. And they're saying they're insured. A lot of people have uninsured money out there. So if you do have uninsured money, try to find a way to place it into an account that is insured. And you have to go into the banking legalese to determine what they've done to your contracts out there, your terms, that you follow them, because they're constantly changing them, and they're usually, no one reads them. They just throw them in the recycling bin, so you really don't know what's going on out there. It might be best to read them and see what they're doing with your money, whether they're insuring certain things. Some accounts they aren't insuring anymore. There's a number of different things that they're doing out here that are just bad practices, and they're going to cost people their whole wealth, entire income, everything they've ever saved could be taken overnight. And if they bring this digital currency in, they're going to have to, the dollar is going to devalue to the point where it's not going to be worth anything. And if it becomes a regional money, in the sense that this globe splits between our currency, crypto type currency, through FedNow or whatever it is that the West is working with, to the East, which is the BRICS nations, and they are then in their own system and they're not using the petrodollar anymore. You have a split world, okay? We're not a global, a unified world anymore, and this is going to affect everything. It's going to affect trade. It's going to affect trade routes. It's going to affect products that you see on the shelves. It's going to affect everything, okay? And they don't want to use us. Look, when we went against Russia and said that we were going to basically not allow them to use the dollar anymore, that sent a global message to the world that we could then, look, if we don't like your behavior, we're going to then ban you from the community. And then the rest of the world on the east side looked at that and said, you know what, we could be next, and we're just not going to go down this road with you. You've already, you know what, your buying power of the dollar is so minimal now. And that's what one of the things that you should look at. The buying power of the dollar is non-existent anymore. It's not worth anything. And so they've devaluated it to the point it's so minimal in value that they can't go any lower, and so they have to break it because there's no value in the dollar anymore. Okay, and you can watch that in many charts. You can see, go look at, how the dollar has been affected over the years and your buying power to where the dollar is today, and you realize that you literally get pennies out of your dollars now compared to what it would have been 50, 75, 100 years ago. And so this is what they're doing. They're destroying your value of money. And everything you work for, you work harder and harder and harder to produce the same effect. And what happens in the end in the Bible? The third seal, it tells us this. You're going to work a whole day and hopefully feed your family. Okay? You'll be lucky to get a loaf of bread at the end of the day. Okay? So it's called hyperinflation, no job, stagflation. There's so many words, but when no one's working, the globe is totally broken down and nothing works anymore. Then we watch that great reset right before the Antichrist comes out in the next year or so. As my chart indicates, probably around March of April of next year. We'll see how the paradigm plays out. But if you're looking at the paradigm that I've been producing, you'll realize that as we walk into that paradigm and into October, as I've shown you around the 10th to the 25th of October, this could really start to break out. And Turkey is getting ready to invade. Turkey, and I'm not going to go into a lot of this, I'll have to do another video. I'm sort of waiting for something to really happen. Turkey now has gone into Iraq. They're basically wanting them to designate the Kurds as a terrorist group. You've had a number of bombings, different things going along the border. Assad and Putin are aligning with Iran right now. And so these guys talking about Ezekiel and it's Iran and all this, you need to look at this because Iran is aligning with Assad in Syria and Russia right now. So what's going to happen? That nation of Iran is going to fall, okay? And Putin's not in a position, as NATO is getting ready to beat his door down with 400,000 troops on multiple different fronts and things like that. This one's going to get really interesting up there. Hopefully it won't boil over to here. We'll see where that goes. I hate to see it boil over anywhere, but this is God's work, and we're going to have to watch how he plays this out. So we're potentially going to watch the dollar spike up again. You're going to watch Bitcoin drop in value, potentially. Another, in the last week or so, you watched this drop. Let me look at the chart here real quick. In the last week, you've gone from 27.5 down to, you're down in the 20, under 26, almost around 26. So you can essentially see another drop similar to that, or more. And I believe these could be more radical drops because as the markets are starting to realize that this is going to create massive pain through these policies of the Fed, that you're going to see the markets start to finally figure this out as we move into September. And they're watching these numbers start to rise now, because you got to realize as these unemployment numbers come in, there's going to be a slowdown in everything as we walk into a couple things. Number one, student loans are going to start coming back in, and people are going to have to start managing those loans on top of their normal bills. And a lot of these rent and things where they weren't paying for their mortgages or rents or whatever the states were forcing people, landlords, to deal with, and these people have to repay these. They're not getting free rent. They're going to have to repay this stuff. And so all these things they threw out that helped you for a short period of time usually come back to haunt you, because it's to get your vote and to get you online with their program, and then you realize later the pain is really a lot worse than what the benefit was, and they're going to see a lot of pain come into this one. So I'm going to end that there. I believe we're going to see metals move down maybe for a few days as J comes out, basically becomes extremely hawkish, says he's going to keep raising rates. There's no mandate for them to not, and he's going to maintain them for a longer duration until he sees massive pain on the unemployment and he sees something happen with core, which says it's actually moving down and that inflation in general is not moving up, as we watch fuel and all these other things go up recently in the last 6 weeks. Bitcoin's going to dump. Bonds are going to melt back up, potentially even higher. I don't know where the two's going to end. It could get really ugly. If it ends up around the 6% mark, like I believe Jay thinks it's going to, that is going to send your 30 years into a double-digit situation, and that then is going to cause, and think about it, you know, if these normal banks are charging 8 or 10%, the regional banks are charging 12 or 14, okay? Because they have to make money somewhere too and survive, or they collapse, which is what they want them to do anyway. So you're going to watch them melt up in the bonds. And I'm not saying all this could happen. I'm just saying based on the trend, this is what should happen. We'll see what does happen. You could see this could get really ugly. I'm just saying, I've talked about October. I'm going to keep stressing October is a really bad month. And when you get into this ending meeting in September, so when you go into this and you look at this, this will be the 19th and the 20th. We're going to have this next meeting, which is when we're going to decide whether we're going to make this next rate change, which is less than a month from now. And so you're going to watch the markets really try to digest how hawkish he's going to be tomorrow. And then they're going to watch a number of numbers come out, like unemployment and stuff, moving into September. And it's going to indicate whether he's going to move or not. Now, he's got to see a lot of unemployment, and he's got to see some kind of change in interest rates for him to go another way. Especially when just the last few weeks we watched them all basically say, we are not done here. And so when their consensus or dot plots basically say they're all going to raise. And look, if they keep changing their mind all the time, they're going to lose credibility. And that then puts the markets into even a worse problem because there's no confidence in what they're seeing out here anymore. And that would then really cause the markets a real problem, okay? Because then they would lose their anchor. Right now, Jay's saying, hey, I'm going to raise. I'm pretty much sure I'm going to raise. You need to listen to me. I'm going to raise. Now, the markets are starting to react to that because you're watching the markets start to move down, okay, into tomorrow. They always do this. They always go up a little and then they crap, you know, they crap out right before we get into this cycle of Jay coming out and talking. It's just the way it plays out, and he's going to raise, and when he does, he's going to shock the markets, and it's going to shock the global markets, not just our markets. So we need to watch how this is going to play out, but the pain is coming in the next month or so. You're going to see this play out. If Turkey breaks out in the Middle East in the next month, which he could, because he's really pushing hard. You go look at the Turkish news out there, Google Turkey, Syria, Erdogan, anything right now. There's a lot of chatter out there, so just keep an eye on that one. But keep an eye on this too. Tomorrow is going to be really interesting as we watch these markets fall out. Right now, the markets, let's go look at the markets real quick. So the Dow Jones is down 326 points because, of course, we are now moving into the end of the last day where Jay's going to come out. They realize it. There's nothing out here that's really showing them that this is going to improve, and that he's probably going to raise tomorrow because he's been telling them that. So now the markets have, for the last week and a half, moved completely down. And so in the last month, so in the last month you've lost almost 1,300 points. In the last 5 days you've lost 221.84 points, but that's on average. And then when you go into today alone, you've lost 326.46. So you've lost almost 1% today alone. Now tomorrow, if you go back to, I wish this had a weekly chart, because it's been about a week. You're going to watch this dump again. You know, you were up here at the top at 34.6. Now you're at 34.1. We're just moving down more and more as this goes on, and as you can go through the charts, you can start to see we're in a massive downtrend that's going to continue. As you watch these charts and you realize that the dollar is now above this moving day average, it's probably going to continue to move up, at least for a little while, and then it will come back down. But as this keeps moving up, the currencies of the foreign currencies will move down. They'll parity out against the dollar to a certain degree, and you will watch metals and stuff basically tank for a while. So we'll see how that all pans out. So yep, between now and September 19th and 20th, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, let me look at my calendar real quick because I want to make sure I don't give you, yes, it'll be the 20th when he makes his next decision. So the 20th is a big day for everybody. Let's keep an eye on between now and the 20th. This is really going to start to change. If he goes up more than 2.5, he actually tries to hit 6. Or if he says he's going to make another increase, 2.6, because the 2-year bond keeps melting up, and that's what he's following, and that's what you should be watching, because if the 2-year bond keeps melting up, he's going to move with it. Nothing else matters out here but the 2-year bond, because that's what he's following. So you can look at all the numbers all day long, but the 2-year bond is where he's going. And if the 2-year bond keeps moving up as it has been, and it gets towards 6, he's going to follow it. And as it's melting up, as you can see radically, he's thinking it's going to probably get there fairly soon as he keeps raising. So let's keep an eye on the 2-year bond. If it goes towards 5.5, then he's probably going to get his wish, and he's going to have to move this to 6, which means you still could get 2 more rate increases. Okay, and you get 2 more rate increases. Think what that could do if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, and you just keep tanking these markets over and over again. No one's going to want to be in the dollar, and they're all going to just leave, which is probably what they want anyway, so they can crash this ledger and build a new one. So God bless everybody. Keep an eye on this one. This one's going to get terribly ugly tomorrow, probably through the next month. This is going to be a massive roller coaster. And it's going to depend on whether the markets decide whether Jay's really telling the truth here and he's going to keep raising rates, or they keep this durational narrative. We're going to have a soft landing somehow. This is really awesome, and there's just no stress out here, and everything's going to get better, which there's no signs of this anywhere out here. And the other thing I want to ask people, and this is a very straightforward question. Now, you know I'm a pre-wrath or 7th trumpet rapture event person, which I believe happens on the Feast of Trumpets in 27, which is on October 2nd and 3rd of 27, because he'll fulfill the fall feast as he did the spring feast when he was crucified and brought him, gave us salvation through his death and his rising. So he will fulfill that, and it will be before the end of the strong generation, which would be in May 14th of 2028. But if you see this massive calamity in front of you and you're watching the markets fail, you're watching all the wars start to break out, you're watching all this stuff happen, then my question is, if you're a pre-rapture individual, and I'm in most sincerity, I'm asking this because I want you to think about this and how you have probably not prepared to be here in case things get really bad. why are you still here if we are in the sorrows and birth pains? And most of you believe that when John is removed in Revelation 4:1, you are going to be removed with him. It does not tell you that. And I've done many studies on this and why I believe this. You will be here till the seventh trumpet. Now, I care about you and your soul, and I want you to realize that you should prepare, have oil in your lamp, because you may be wrong. I may be wrong. Okay? I'm not just saying I'm right. I'm just saying, based on my studies, this is where I've come to. You indicate to me in these teachings that you will not have to endure any of this pain and you'll be removed before it gets there. But I'm watching the pain in front of me, and my question is, yes, we've seen these kinds of things happen in the past, but if we're in the sorrows and birth pains and we're getting ready to watch a massive breakout in the Middle East, and I know what you're going to say, you're going to be raptured on the Feast of Trumpets of this year. I've already heard this argument. I'm guaranteeing you that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You're going to be here till the Feast of Trumpets of 27, okay? Right before the strong generation and the end of that, which is the 80th year, the fourscore generation, that generation, May 14th of 28, work back to the fall feast of 27, that's when I targeted, okay? And I believe that he tells us that we will be down here and we will be trampling the Temple Mount and doing all the things that he tells us we're going to be. And I don't know why he would have wrote a book about it if we weren't going to be here anyway. It doesn't make any sense. To warn the wicked that he's going to do terrible things to them? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So anyway, realize that if you are still here, if you're going through this, if you're watching your world collapse around you, maybe you aren't yet, maybe you're still in the blue skies phase, that will change. And you will be stuck in a position where you will make bad decisions at the worst possible time because inflation will eat you alive and you won't be able to prepare as well as you should have, and wouldn't have the time to do all the things that you need to do to get ready for something that God already told you should be getting ready for. Putting oil in your lamp and getting ready for his return, which is not during or before the seals. I'm sorry. I just don't buy into that narrative, and I'm going to watch a lot of people get disillusioned with the churches here soon, and they're going to lose their way because they've been lied to for so long that they're going to get this comfort blanket and they're not going to have to go through any of this. Look, he made his people walk through a desert for 40 years in circles. He puts everybody under judgment. No one gets a free ride out of this one. Everyone, myself including, is under judgment right now. He's watching us. He's taking notes right this moment. He's going to see how we're going to react as he's moving us through this fire phase and just refining us to get us to this next level called the millennial or the eternity, depending on where you end up. So you need to realize this is what this is about. The flesh does not and is not going to matter much longer because the flesh will move away and we won't be flesh any longer here soon. And today, of all things, on my calendar, we're at 1,500 days. So I think that's a pretty important thing that we are at a 1,500-day calendar from the Feast of Trumpets, October 2nd of 2027, which is when I believe we're going to be raptured. So I say we're going to be here 1,500 more days. And another thing I think is really interesting, I should have brought this up. Now, in my world, I'm sorry, I'm making this video probably longer than I was planning on. It's running into almost 50 minutes here, but I think this is extremely important. So we have this event this month that I think is extremely powerful. We are having 2 supermoons in August, which is extremely rare, okay? We had one on the 1st, and we're going to have one on the 30th. So 31st, okay? So it's going to wrap around the whole month. And is this a sign to us that we're going to watch maybe something really break out before the end of this month. We're having this next meeting. Turkey's getting ready to break out. Israel and Iran are getting ready to go down. All this stuff's happening out here. I believe we're going to see something massively happen in the next potential week, week and a half, as the Fed comes out and basically says, you know what, I'm going to wreck your world here, okay? So just realize that we have these two super moons that are wrapping around this month. One is on August 1st, which we just had, and we're having another one on the 30th, 31st, which is a unique event. Okay, and it's extremely interesting that it's happening while all this other stuff's going on. Israel's a mess right now. That one national security guard just came back out. The guy that keeps throwing it down on the Temple Mount. Now we're talking about Saudi Arabia of all things, maybe protecting this Temple Mount or having control of it. This is a total mess over there. But just realize that in the middle of all this, and then you just had the 9th of Av, which was the 26th of last month, I believe. So, a lot going on as we move forward. But I think we've seen a massive ramp up in the last month here. And you're watching the markets now screaming out there that the bonds are basically telling us that everything's completely broken and this is not going to be easy to fix. So wrapped up in all this, we're seeing two super moons in the same month. Really interesting time, folks. Things are really going to start to move pretty fast at this point. I think this is going to amplify quickly, and you are going to see a lot of changes by October. I've been stressing October for a while. By the end of October, maybe even by October, middle October, this is going to get really intense out here. So just keep an eye on everything. Just wanted to bring a number of these things up, but tomorrow is going to be a terrible day in the markets. I believe it could be it could actually be. Now they're going to get one more chance between now and September to determine whether Jay's really being honest and that he's going to continue this raising. But he's pretty much on a mission at this point, and so I think he's going to raise, and I think they're going to have some realization between his speech tomorrow and the numbers coming in on just how bad this economy really is. You know, that you've had companies like Foot Locker just getting trashed. Carvana's getting trashed. Everything, a number of companies, especially when you get into apparel, phones, things like that. When people aren't spending money on phones and apparel, they're spending it on something else, survivability. And so we're going to watch the liquid cash move away from just whatever we want to spend it on to we have to spend it on things that we need to, and we also have to figure out now how to pay all this debt we've entrenched ourselves in most cases. So a lot going on out here, guys. This one's going to get really interesting. The markets are going to get extreme here, and the volatility is going to get just off the charts. So God bless. Find the door. Find Jesus. It's the only way to the next plane, the next level. It's the only way to the Creator. If you don't believe in the Son, you're not going to make it there. Only a third of the Jews get to go in the sixth seal event that I believe is going to happen as Turkey attacks them with 10 full nations. A third of them, only a third, get removed. And I believe that they are the true believing Jews that believe in the Son of God or Jesus, and that there will be a terrible judgment against the people that don't. And so we'll see how that turns out. This is going to be an extremely crazy event. It's a sevenfold evil event. Things are going to get crazy as we watch the world collapse and we start to watch a great reset into a antichrist system and a rise of an antichrist potentially in the next year or less, based on my paradigm. So watch October though. Up to this point, let's take one step at a time. Let's get through September. We'll see where we are in October. If Turkey's broken out by then they're probably going to be looking at Jerusalem pretty hard and trying to protect that Temple Mount. As I just found out that Iran now has the capacity through a drone to actually do a nuclear strike on Israel. And so if you've been watching Russia at all, the drone strikes are intense over there and causing massive havoc throughout both countries. And so this is a new type of war, and this is the real threat that someone could launch a potential drone against Israel and actually destroy it through a nuclear threat, which Erdogan is not going to allow that to happen. So keep an eye on Turkey. Turkey and the Kurds, Daniel 8. I've been talking this one for a while. That will happen, and we will watch an Ezekiel 38, 39 effect shortly after that with 10 nations on the attack of Israel as we move forward. Probably by the end of this year. We'll see you later. God bless. Find the open door. Find Jesus.